Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be giving a list of the best books you could ever read in your life. This is my god tier, my favourite books of all time, and I'm making this video now because my reading taste has kind of shifted. So I'm about to start on a whole new journey of reading high fantasy and loads of different types of books that I've not read before. So I wanted to make this video now to document my favourite books of all of like the typical YA romance, romantasy, contemporary romance books that I've read so far. So I've decided to make this video now so that when I make, I don't know, in a few years time, my new one of all of my new amazing 5-star reads, I can look back and see how far I've come. So this is just a list of my favourite books of all time, but obviously a recommendation for you as well. If you're looking for some new books, some of these books you will have heard of and you will have probably read because I'm nothing if not basic. But popular books are popular for a reason, so let's start. I fear Sarah J Maas was always going to come up, so I'm just going to start with her. Throne of Glass is my favourite fantasy series I've ever read. I've read a lot of them. I've read a lot of fantasy books in my time. I've been actively reading fantasy for like over 5 years now, so there's a lot on the list, but Throne of Glass was the first one that I read. It was my first one because all of my siblings are avid Sarah J Maas lovers. My sister, she read ACOTAR like the month it came out or something ridiculous like that. And so she's always been a Sarah J Maas stan. So as soon as I became old enough to read, she was like, Abby, you're reading these. So I started with Throne of Glass because both my brothers have read both series as well and they love them, but all of their favourites was ACOTAR. So I started with Throne of Glass because I wanted to save the best till last, but unintentionally, this is definitely my favourite one. I do love ACOTAR, it is the next series in this list, but Throne of Glass is just my baby. So to give you a brief synopsis, you can't really, I feel like the first book is just not representative of the whole series, but I will just give you the description of the first book. We have an assassin, Selena Sardothian, who is in basically jail. Like she's a slave in the mines in this weird jail that treats them all horribly, and the prince comes to her and he offers for her to compete in this competition to become the king's champion. I think that's the name. Anyway, the personal assassin of the king to carry out all of his dirty work, and she decides to enter because it's either that or hell, basically. She enters this competition and it takes place in the castle, so she goes to the castle, meets the prince, meets the captain of the guard, embarks on this wonderful journey and there. But this series, like that description is nothing compared to what you will read. You will read a masterpiece. Like genuinely, I've not read a series that travels so far from the first book to the rest of the book, and that's what truly makes a series for me. I feel like I could just read a standalone if I wanted a certain type of book, but what I want from a series is to grow so much with the characters and to see such a journey that they go on, and that's what I feel like happens in Throne of Glass. By the end of the series, you have a cast of like over 10 characters that you're all so attached to. You love them all. There's not a main character in this book that I don't like. They all are so different. They're just the romance in this series. What my personal taste I've discovered is I love when it's a fantasy book with a romance subplot. Obviously there are just straight romances that I've loved, but my favourite series always have a strong fantasy background, and I feel like Throne of Glass does that. It's not the best in the world, but the romance means so much more to me when there's not as much of it. And it's still got a heavy romance, but it's just, I feel a lot more equal than some of the books I've been reading recently, and I've just been missing my babies. Empire of Storms, I chose to show this one because apart from Kingdom of Ash, it is my favourite, and I feel like Kingdom of Ash gets all the recognition that she needs. Empire of Storms is fantastic, and I feel like because of the tandem read, some people don't appreciate it because they hate Tower of Dawn, but I didn't do the tandem read because it wasn't a thing when I read the series. And I read Empire of Storms by itself and it's just so beautiful. And then I read Tower of Dawn and I actually grew to really love that book and appreciate it. It's by far not my favourite, but I really appreciate what it did, and it made the wait, because Empire of Storms does end on a huge cliffhanger and then Tower of Dawn switches to a different set of characters, so you're kind of like, you want to know what happens, but because it's drawn out for so long, it makes Kingdom of Ash so much better. So that's the first one. And then of course I did have to talk about ACOTAR, my baby. So I would say the second one, and to be honest, I think A Court of Wings and Ruin is also insanely good. Like, I would say they're both on a similar standing for me, but I only own the second one. I've only got the first two because I read the whole series on my Kindle. So I read this quite a while after Throne of Glass because I wanted to save a good series for a rainy day, basically. So this was when it was fully blowing up online. I'd seen all of the hype on social media, all of my siblings that are obsessed with it. So I remember when I read the first one, I didn't gaslight myself because I wasn't lying to myself, but I definitely, like, I gave the first one 5 stars when I read it, and I would not give it that anymore. Because I was slightly underwhelmed, even though I was trying to tell myself that I loved it so much, when I read the second one, I was like, if this isn't good, I'm literally not gonna carry on the series, because I just feel like it's got so much hype and I'm just not the hugest fan. And then I read this and it all changed for me, and I still love the first one. I mean, I did obviously like it enough when I read it to read the second one. It's another case of you read the first book in the series and by the time you get to the last one, it's a completely different series and it already starts changing in this one. So let me give you, and I keep forgetting to give the synopsis. In the first book, Feyre, she's a human and she's very poor. She hunts for her family because they can't afford to buy food. And she goes hunting and she shoots this wolf and she thinks she's going to make loads of money. But then an evil fae from the Feylands crosses the border and comes to take her, because it turns out the wolf she killed was actually another fae, because fae can shapeshift into animals. She essentially, it's either get killed or go with evil fae and live with him. So she decides to go and live with him, and she's taken to the Feylands, and the story goes from there. This is the second one. It is probably my favourite, but not by much because the whole series is so good. I would highly recommend, I'm sure everyone watching this has read both of these series, but they are stunning. However, I do think that they could easily be taken over once I start my deep dive into high fantasy, because I feel like all the things I'm hearing about high fantasy is exactly what I want to be reading. These books, whilst I do love them, I can see that there's flaws, especially in the writing. Also, Sarah J Maas, not an amazing person, so I don't want to be shouting her praise from the rooftops all the time. So watch this space, because I do fear that a new favourite series is on the horizon. If I had to pick just a favourite book of all time, it would be this. Because in series, you love the whole series. There's not one specific book that you're like, this is it, like this is the whole series in one book, because it's a series. Whereas because The Night Circus is a standalone, I feel like I can confidently say literally favourite book of all time. This is my reading taste in one book. It's so like beautifully magical, like the way it's written. It feels like when you're reading it, you're in a different world, which a lot of books obviously feel like that, but it's so hard to describe if you've not read it. This might not be everyone's cup of tea. If you're not up for a whimsical, fairy tale-esque, beautifully magical time, then it's not going to be for you. Trust me, when you read it, it is. It's about Celia and, oh my goodness. It's about Celia and Marco, who were raised so they're magicians, and they were raised to enter this duel to the death, essentially, to prove which magician was stronger. So they're like raised by these other two magicians that hate each other, and they're creating their own contest, and then Celia and Marco are like drawn into it because, anyway, that was an awful explanation, but they're raised to fight to the death. They're raised to be enemies. This magical circus, it only appears at night. It's called the Circus of Dreams, and it's like this whole new world when you step into the real world, because it is set in just a normal real world. This circus is the arena that this magical battle will take place in. And I feel like, whilst that is the synopsis, that's not really what this book is, because when you think magical duel, magical battle, you think they're going to fight each other, but it's not really like that. And there is a love story in it, and that's all I will say. It is beautiful. There is stunning characters. They're all very unique. I feel like there's not one character in here that I would say resembles another, and it's just so perfect. It's, if I was to write a novel, this writing style is how I would write. Like, it's just beautiful to me, and I love a beautiful flowery writing style, but when it's not done with a good book, it's like the only good thing about the book is the writing style, then I'm not going to enjoy it. But when it's such an amazing story and such amazing characters, when they're written in this way, it just hits so much harder to me. Another very whimsical and beautifully written series is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. I'm pretty sure that's not the name of the trilogy, but I'm not going to look it up. So this is the second one, The Ballad of Never After. First one is Once Upon a Broken Heart. Again, very whimsical, very magical. It's what I love. This series is about Evangeline, and her true love decides he's going to marry her sister instead, and she thinks he's been cursed. She thinks this can't be right, so she goes to the Prince of Hearts. Wait, that is not his name, is it? The Prince of Hearts. Anyway, she goes to this magical being there called the Fates, and she asks him to help save her true love from this wedding to his sister. And in return, obviously, because fates are never just kind, they're fickle beings. So in return, she owes Jax 3 kisses. And that's kind of how the story starts. And once again, it deviates from that plotline a lot. The world is just so, it's so beautiful. Like, if I could go into a fantasy book, this would be the book that I would choose to travel to. It's so interesting, and the love story is beautiful. It's just the perfect amount of angst and yearning, and also a lot of plot. This is another stunning trilogy. I highly recommend that you read it. Staying on the fantasy vein, another duology that I read right at the beginning of my journey, along with ACOTAR and Throne of Glass, is Six of Crows. Once again, another highly acclaimed, is that a word? Critically acclaimed is a word, but I don't know if that would describe this book. Very popular. I found this on BookTube, but it also became popular on BookTok. It's a series, it's a duology following 6 criminals, crooks, people from all sorts of backgrounds, as they take on this impossible heist because it's a lot of money and they're all poor, so why not? And most of them, some of them haven't met each other before, some of them have. The relationship dynamics between the 6 of them is truly what drew me to it. There is a lot of good plot, but it is truly the characters that sell this book to you. If you don't like the characters, you're not going to like the books. It's supposed to be YA, but you cannot tell me that any character in this book is 16 years old. They all walk, talk and act like they're nearly 30, so I think even though it's a YA series, it's truly accessible to every audience. It's just chef's kiss. Also in the YA vein, the Infernal Devices trilogy. The first one is my favourite, I think, but they all kind of blur into one big book for me because it's been so long since I read them. As you can see, in the start of my reading journey, I definitely went for all of the popular books at the time, and honestly since then, because some of these books I read upwards of 5 to 6 years ago, and I've still not found books that top it, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, which is why I'm entering my new high fantasy era, because I think that's where it's going to be for me. However, Infernal Devices, stunning. It's a trilogy. Will Herondale is one of my favourite book characters of all time. So this series is kind of hard to explain if you don't know what the Shadowhunters world is about. So the world is kind of introduced in the Mortal Instruments series, which the first one is City of Bones. This series is set in that world, but hundreds of years before in a different country. The world building is still the same. So Shadowhunters are they're basically humans that are stronger and have magical powers to hunt demons and kill demons, but they can't be seen by mortal eyes. Demons and angels and Shadowhunters and witches and warlocks and werewolves and vampires, none of this can be seen by humans, but they still exist in the human world, so it's an urban fantasy. And in this first book here, our main character, why am I forgetting everyone's name? Tessa Gray, our main character, she travels from America to England because she has, her brother has invited her over, she's going to stay with her brother, and she gets there and she gets kidnapped by these 2 very devious women who are definitely not human. And so it's kind of intriguing because how can Tessa see these people if she's human? She ends up getting rescued in the first chapter by Shadowhunters, so I feel like that I can say that happens in the first chapter. or maybe second, but you know. She gets rescued by Shadowhunters and taken to where they live, which is called the Institute, and it goes from there. She has to solve this mystery. Where's her brother? Why did she get kidnapped? How can she see everything that's going on? It's a very, very beautiful trilogy. All of the characters are stunning. It's one of the only love triangles where I loved both characters. I always knew which team I was on for her to be with, but the other man in the love triangle is still one of my favourite characters. He's such an angel. So it's a very, very good series. It's also YA, but once again, do they really feel like 16, 17-year-olds? No. Now, this next book, would I classify it as fantasy? No. But it's a Greek mythological retelling. The Song of Achilles, once again, very popular for a reason. The writing of this book is impeccable as well. I love a well-written book. It really, really gets me. So it's a retelling of, well, the Trojan War, which is basically the Iliad. So you follow Achilles, but the main character is actually Patroclus, which is Achilles' best friend in the Iliad. And in this book, it is a romance between the two. Which, I mean, that's not a spoiler because I feel like you can tell, but you follow Patroclus's life. It's from his perspective, but Achilles is so intertwined with it that you also follow Achilles' life as well. Yeah, it's a retelling of the Iliad, so if you know what happens in the Iliad, you know what is going to happen in here, but it's still worth a read. The perspective that Madeline Miller takes is really interesting, especially if you're into Greek mythology and you know a lot about Achilles already. However, I didn't know a single thing. Not a single thing before I read this book. This book is what sparked my interest in Greek mythology, and I ended up doing my EPQ on it, which is a project that you can do in the UK education system, and it's basically a big essay. And I ended up doing my essay about Greek mythology because of the passion that I got for it from this book. However, if you don't know anything, you can still read this completely, because I didn't know anything and I devoured this book. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful story. It has also taught me about my reading taste, is that I love a book that follows a character's whole life, or that follows a long time with this character, because I feel like that's when I get truly attached to characters, and when I'm attached to the character, I'm obsessed with the book. The next set of books are all some sort of contemporary fiction, so this is my fantasy list. It's quite small, but I've realised whilst I love fantasy as a genre, and there's so many good, amazing recommendations I could give you, they're not my god tier. Do you know what I mean? So if you want some more fantasy recommendations, comment down below. I will happily give that to you. I have so many. But this is my little collection of my favourites. Daisy Jones and the Six. What a book. I actually don't think I'd seen... I think this was popular when I read it, but I'd not seen anything about it. I saw one video recommending it. I was like, okay, I'm going to read it. Little did I know the absolute journey this book would take me on. I cried so much. I think the characters felt so real. It's told entirely through like interview format, so it's only dialogue, the whole book. And I thought I would hate that. I remember, because obviously I read it before it became a show, for years I was like, this needs to be a show, this could be such a good like documentary style show, and they did it, and I'm so glad, but I still prefer the book. This follows an insanely famous band in their own. If you think of like, well, it's inspired heavily by Fleetwood Mac, who were obviously really famous, but these were more famous than Fleetwood Mac in this one. Like, they're one of the iconic bands of the 60s, 70s, whatever era this was in. So it's basically written like a documentary would be, of them now talking about how they formed and how it was like the true story behind everything that was going on, how they wrote their albums, and then how they broke up. And that doesn't sound that interesting. I feel like to me it does, but to a lot of people that doesn't sound that amazing. Trust me, you need to read this book. It is just phenomenal, and I couldn't say anything to convince you more. So I obviously read and loved this book, and then The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo blew up, and I was like, oh my goodness, I already love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I need to read this book. Can we just take a moment to appreciate the sprayed edges? And also, this is the Waterstones edition, I think. I don't know if, maybe it's not specifically Waterstones, but that's where I bought it. This book, yes, it's insanely hyped for a good reason. Like, when I tell you, oh my god, this book, it's just so good. So it's a similar style of book to Daisy Jones and the Six in the fact that it follows a celebrity, but that's where the similarities basically end. In fact, no, because it is mainly told through an interview. It's kind of like two books in a book, because you follow Monique, who is a journalist who she's kind of trying to break through in that, like, as an author or as a journalist, but nothing's really going well for her. But then Evelyn Hugo gives her a call and says, I'm going to tell you my entire life story without leaving anything out. Like, I'm going to tell you everything, and you're going to write it up as a biography, and you're going to make loads of money from it. And Monique's a bit like, why me? I'm literally a nobody journalist who no one's heard of. But she obviously takes the deal, who wouldn't? And she goes to meet Evelyn. Evelyn was a famous movie star from, I think, the 50s onwards. I think it's the 50s where it was like her prime time. But she's like Marilyn Monroe vibes, like one of the pioneers of cinema. She had 7 husbands, and everyone wants to know who the love of her life was. Everyone wants to know what was really going on, how she became famous. And she's never told anyone, been radio silent about it, until she contacts Monique and says, I'm going to tell you everything. So this is very highly sought after information. So Monique accepts the deal, and we learn about Evelyn's entire life, but we also learn about her relationship with Monique. We learn about stuff going on in Monique's life, but it does mainly follow Evelyn, and it's just it is beautiful. Of course, I had to mention her. Magnolia Parks, what a series. This is my favourite so far. However, I've not read the last 2. I started Daisy Hates the Great Undoing and then stopped reading it because I knew I was going to be obsessed with it and I didn't want it to end. This is a trend that is scaringly common in my books. There's so many books I've read, well, that I've half read and then stopped reading because I love them so much, and it doesn't make any sense in my brain, but that's just what happens. So I've not finished The Great Undoing, and I've also not read Into the Dark. I do think I prefer Daisy Hates and Christian as a couple, but this book, obviously I love Magnolia and BJ just a lot, or else I wouldn't like the series because they're half of this series. But my point is, this you need to read her. A lot of people hate Magnolia Parks, and I understand why, and I completely agree with the criticisms, but I'm obsessed with it anyway. It's a god tier book for me, so obviously I need to be obsessed with it, or else I wouldn't put it on this list. Look how heavily annotated she is. In fact, let me give you the synopsis first. Magnolia, the best way to say it succinctly is Gossip Girl in London. That's what everyone says, and that's truly how I feel it is. It's a group of friends that are extremely high society. I'm not just talking rich, I'm talking like billionaire rich, like mega rich, living in London. And Magnolia and BJ are the main characters of these books, and there's also another half of the series that follow Daisy and Julian. Not Daisy and Julian, that's her brother. Daisy and Christian is in their friend group, so they eventually intertwine, but it does kind of feel like, well, they do intertwine a lot, but they are definitely separate characters. That's basically it. It's kind of no plot, just vibes. Like, there is a plot, but there's not something that kicks off the series. It kind of just follows the characters in their everyday lives as they fall in love, fall out of friendships, fall out of relationships, getting loads of drama. It's just your classic kind of TV show. I feel like this would be a very good TV show, but what makes me obsessed with it is the characters. They're so complex and so interesting. The relationships between them are just, and most of all is the writing. Jessa Hastings, I don't know what is different about her mind, but she writes like she's pulled feelings from my brain and then written them perfectly. Like the use of similes and metaphors is insane. Like, they're not ones that you would expect. They're not the cliche ones. They're ones that perfectly describe strange and niche everyday scenarios. And it's insane to read. Like, the writing truly is magnificent, and I only hope to be an author of this caliber one day. I just couldn't not talk about this series. It means so much to me. It is stunning, and you're either gonna love it or you hate it. I've never seen people that just like it. They either heavily dislike or heavily love, and I am someone that heavily loves this series. To all the boys I've loved before, this book, I feel like on paper there's nothing about this book that stands out against many other rom-coms. However, I have read this book 5 times. I've read the whole series once, and then I just keep rereading the first one. I don't know why, because I love the second 2, but but I don't own them physically. I have them on my Kindle, but I'll reread the first one thinking I'm going to do the whole series, and then I get distracted. But I just keep rereading this, and every time I'm just obsessed. I think it's the perfect September read. It's not like fully autumn, but it's also not summer anymore. And it's like a warm hug. It is so cozy. The main character, Lara Jean, she is me. She is me at heart. I am her. We are just so similar. I feel like that's why I love this series so much, is because I see so much of myself in Lara Jean. Just her personality type in general is who I am. It's just so... I just can't, you just need to read it. You need to read it. I struggle to put romance books in my god tier list because romance just does not compare to fantasy in my mind. I love it as its own thing, but like I've given romance books 5 stars, but they're 5 stars for romance. They just don't compare to a lot of fantasy books. This book, I don't know what it is about it. I'm sure you've all seen the film. This is better. The film is still one of my favourite rom-coms ever. It basically follows Lara Jean, who she's a bit of an introvert, a bit shy, doesn't really handle talking to boys that well. So instead of telling them she likes them, she writes love letters to them, and kind of she describes it as her love letters are her exorcisms. So she kind of dispels all of her feelings for this man into the letter. She writes it and then she forgets about it. But she doesn't really forget about it, but she pretends that she does. And one day they will get sent out. And I think there's 5 of them, and that's kind of where the story goes from there. There is fake dating in this, and it is divine to read about. I just think, if you've never thought about it, read the books. They are so good. I don't know if it's just me that's obsessed with them, but this will always be a book that I adore. The last book I have on this list is, I think, the only one that I've read, this Ballad of Never After I think I read last year. This one I read this year. Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. But apart from these 2, everything else I'm pretty sure I read in like my first year of properly reading as a teenager, which is crazy to me because there's no way I've not found a book since then. Oh, to be fair, Magnolia Parks. Okay, I'm lying. There's a few on here that are recent, but the majority are over 5 years old. Anyway, Tomorrow is... I don't know how to describe this book. I don't know, and everyone who reads it says it, and I was so confused. I was like, how can you not just give a synopsis of the book? And then I read it and I understand. Once again, written amazingly. Like, you can tell she's smart when you're reading the book. It's, to put it simply, it's about 2 childhood best friends that bond over video games and then in the future go on to make video games together and become really successful. And that's basically it. Like, I feel like the other parts of this story, I would be here for hours explaining to you the synopsis, but it's so much more than that. There is love in this book, but it is not a romance. It's not a romance book. It's much more contemporary fiction following these 2 main characters and then the other characters they surround themselves with. It is just beautiful. I think the conversations in this book are key. There are so many quotes in this book that are so beautiful. I literally read this in 2 days, and I love video games, which is why I read it. If you don't like video games, I can't see someone hearing about this book and wanting to read it. But truly, if you have no interest in video games, you still need to read this book. It's beautiful. So that concludes my little pile, my babies, my list of my god tier favourite books of all time. I'm still going to be filming many recommendation videos that these books won't feature in because I have read so many books that I love, but these are like the creme de la creme of literature, in my humble opinion. So thank you for watching. If you stuck around to the end, you're a real one. I hope you got a new recommendation in this very heavily popular list of books. I'm not sure there's many that you won't have heard of, but if you've heard of it and this video convinces you to finally bite the bullet and read it, my job is done. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye!